We've got Shannon Thrace from USA. She's a creative non-fiction writer, an IT professional who's passionate about philosophy, ethics, unplugging, and seeing the world. You can learn more by subscribing to Shannon's Substack, which we'll put in the chat. And she's got a memoir, 18 Months, on the unraveling of her 15-year relationship when her husband came out as a transgender, and it's now available on Amazon. So thank you so much, Shannon. And the title of your talk is Shannon Thrace, a Trans Widow Speaks.
I'm Shannon Thrace. I'm here to talk about my marriage and divorce to a male-born person who announced that he was transgender. As Joe mentioned, I've written a book. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But before I get into my story, I just wanted to briefly touch on why I speak about this. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One is that with the transgender identities on the rise, the issues in the news, all the things going on, I find that the narrative often promoted is not the one that I witnessed. And so a lot of things about my story just really don't fit the dominant narrative. They aren't, what I watched was not what people say happens. And so I want to tell that story. I want to talk about how my ex-husband, Jamie, seemed to acquire gender dysphoria rather than being born with it or having it for a really long time. And how transition seemed to make Jamie more unhappy instead of happier. And then another reason why I want to speak is because I really believe that women have the right to tell our stories. And I hear from a lot of other trans widows who say they're having a very hard time talking about this or getting a platform for it or not getting shut down. And I think it's an important story. Just like any other story by any woman, I think women have the right to speak. We have the right to tell our stories. And that's something I believe. So I'll start with me, just a little bit of background about me, because I think it's relevant to the story. So I'm a liberal. I have had same-sex relationships, both before and after my marriage to my ex-husband, Jamie. I actually came out to my mom at the age of 11, told her I thought I was gay. That didn't go over very well. I struggled with that for a while, but I did come to terms with that in my adulthood. And by the time I met Jamie, I was very open-minded, very liberal, very, pro LGBTQ. I had gone through a polyamorous phase. I have had a lot of experience, a lot of interesting sexual experience. And so when Jamie told me that he was transgender, I did not have any political agenda or feminist agenda. I was ready to lean into that. So that's where I was at the time that this occurred. So Jamie and I met in kind of an atmosphere of partying. He was actually involved with someone else. I was identifying as a lesbian. We were flirting, but I really didn't think it would go anywhere. And so that's how it started. We had some physical attraction, we had some fun, and that slowly turned into a real relationship. And then, of course, we got married. And where my story begins, Jamie and I had been together for 14 years, and we had actually settled into a really cozy, really lovely, quiet life. We had kind of gotten through our partying phase. We had lived in the city, so we were kind of urbane type people, but we had also moved to the country to attempt a homestead and just to have sort of a quieter life. So we did a lot of gardening. We did a lot of cooking. We drank lemonade on the porch. We watched the cows in the neighboring farm. It was a quiet life. It was a happy life. I had no idea that anything could change or could go really seriously awry, or nor did I have any idea that Jamie had any issues with gender. He was actually pretty masculine. He had a really large beard. He enjoyed backpacking, video games, very typical male interests. Wasn't beyond, it wasn't above bragging and, drinking beer and going out with the boys and all those sorts of things that men do. So as a matter of fact, once he said, I can't wait to become an old man. And I kind of chuckled at that and asked him what he meant. And he said, there's a grace in growing old, and it's a reprieve from expectations. And then he said that he wanted to play Santa at the mall. So he very much seemed settled into a male identity. So then one fateful evening, as I said, 14 years in, Jamie told me that he wanted to look at pornography. And we looked at pornography together, and he directed our search toward transsexual porn. And just as an aside here, I'm aware of the problematic nature of pornography, the sex trafficking. I'm not in favor of it at the time. I had not really thought about it very deeply. I'm human, it was something I did. And I think it's important to tell the truth about that, because I think it plays a role in Jamie's identity formation. So I don't want to gloss that over. But I also don't want to deny my participation in that at the time. After this incident of looking at the transsexual porn, Jamie wanted to cross-dress, and I gave him a makeover that night. We had sex, and then he wanted to cross-dress the next day, and he wanted to make it a thing. Now, I was, as I said, we both identified as feminists. I was unaware of any divisions within the feminist movement at the time. My thought was, and still is, that people can wear whatever they want. Women's clothes don't belong to women. Femininity is a social construction. If he wants to wear a dress, I really don't care. So that's how I felt about it at the time. And that's how he felt about it too. And he actually started a blog called Outside the Binary, in which he kind of bragged that he enjoyed cross-dressing as a means of self-expression. He wasn't a woman. He admitted male privilege, and really under no duress whatsoever, he launched this blog and kind of produced these manifestos defending cross-dressing and kind of also denying that he might be a woman in any way, because he'd heard those sorts of arguments out in the world, and even saying, that he wasn't sure that was a good way to go. So that's where he was for quite a while, for several months. And then one evening while we were out dining at a restaurant, somebody told Jamie, hey, I just realized that you look like Brad Pitt. And Jamie started to cry. And the conversation that we had as a result of that moment revealed that Jamie had acquired gender dysphoria, and that he had started to think of himself as a woman. He had started to believe that he was passing, which was actually really odd, because during those first months, he was dressing rather androgynously. Sometimes he'd wear a woman's shirt, maybe with some, bell sleeves or a ruffly neckline or something like that, but he'd still wear jeans and like high top chucks and things like that. So it really came as a surprise to me that he was feeling that way. And it seemed like maybe it even came as a surprise to him. And shortly after this, Jamie said he was transgender. He came out to his friends and family, and immediately, overnight, he plunged into a misery that was just remarkable. He cried every single night from the moment of the reveal. And our life really took a downturn. And two things I think were especially affected. Everything was affected, but two things really were suffering at that point. And one of them was sex. And that was because Jamie had gender dysphoria now, did not like to think of himself as a man, did not like to acknowledge his body parts. And so, as you might imagine, it was difficult to be in the moment physically with someone who needs to play all these head games and to deny what he is. And so many things would trigger it, and there was a lot of pretending and so forth. Also because of self-absorption on his part, he seemed to be thinking about how he looked and how he should dress and what he looked like sexually. And he was interested in doing some sexual things that I was willing to role play for him on occasion, but I didn't want these things taking over our sex life and replacing real skin to skin contact and honesty and intimacy and things like that. And then another part of that was that he got laser surgery. He started to dress a lot um, more ridiculously, really, just to wear much more femmy things that I wouldn't have even been attracted to had they been on a woman. And so his presentation started to turn me off too. And so we were both struggling. He was struggling because of gender dysphoria. I was struggling because I wasn't interested in this presentation that he had put on. And this is why I like to mention my past, because a lot of people will say, well, if you're a lesbian or you're bisexual, you shouldn't have any trouble here because now your husband's a woman. Well, he wasn't a woman, right? And so having sex with a man who's cross-dressed or who's acting is not the same thing as having sex with a woman. And then the other thing that really suffered was our communication. And that suffered because he had started to take on a very practiced fake persona. And I think that's interesting because the story we're given is that these people are naturally a man is naturally more feminine or a woman is naturally more masculine, and that they're just revealing their true authentic selves, right? They're being what they always were anyway. If that's the case, why did he need to practice? Why did he need to raise his voice to a higher octave so he could sound a little more feminine? Why did he need to take on wrist gestures that he thought looked feminine? And so he was doing a lot of a practiced persona. He was parroting lines from things he'd heard online, which made our conversations difficult because I wasn't following these same conversations. So I couldn't just have a give and take conversation with him anymore. He would say something that just didn't make sense. He was inventing persecution. He was saying that various people had been mean to him, that they had been transphobic, that they had hassled him. And in some of these situations, I was there during the moment that he reframed later as an incident of harassment. And I was, having been there, knew that these things didn't happen. And so he was lying. He was parroting what turned out to be lines from activism circles, which I didn't know at the time. And it became very difficult for us to communicate. The other thing that started to happen was this nightly crying. It didn't cease. And Jamie started to have a lot of meltdowns at home. He had meltdowns about how he looked, about how he thought someone was treating him, about how he thought someone was perceiving him. One of the things he worried about was, did he look gay? Which really bothered me, right? Because that sounds kind of homophobic. It's like, well, why is that a bad thing, right? So Jamie was having a lot of depression, a lot of misery, a lot of drama, a lot of meltdowns, and he ended up going to a therapist who prescribed him antidepressants, but who also said that she thought that it would be, quote, fun to transition him. And she said that on his very first visit. So, I have to wonder if she had some influence there. Jamie also dropped out of housework, hobbies, work, just about everything. And so we lived for several months in this real turmoil and stress, and it started to really get to me. And so I took a solo camping trip so that I could think. I did some writing and I did some thinking and I did some soul searching. And I came out of that realizing that I needed to get a divorce. It had been months with no change. Jamie wasn't willing to be honest at home. That was really one of the main things. And so I came out of that trip realizing, most of all, that I could not compromise my own integrity. And so I realized that no matter what else might change, even if Jamie got happier or whatever else, or started doing more housework or these sorts of things, that I wasn't willing to lie. And Jamie had stopped saying that he was presenting as a woman and started saying that he was literally a woman. And I wasn't allowed, or it wasn't okay if I said, no, you're presenting as a woman, but you're not literally a woman. I had used pronouns to be polite. I had started to think of them as contributing to the problem, and so I became conflicted about that too. The other thing that I decided during that camping trip was that I just will not sacrifice myself. I did not want to live with this endless self-absorption, this inability to just move forward with a normal life. I wanted to have good times. I wanted to travel. I wanted to live well. To me, that's not compatible with this kind of constant rumination and, seeking persecution and looking for trouble, and just endless, really rumination on identity. It's not a way I wanted to live. And so I initiated a divorce. And after the divorce, I really picked up my life. I went to grad school. I did some traveling, and I made a good life for myself. So it was a good thing that I left. It was definitely a positive move in the end. As I said, I have written a book on this. It's called 18 Months. It's available on Amazon. But the thing I think want to leave people with, especially women, is just that I didn't want to compromise myself. I didn't want to compromise my integrity, my honesty. And I don't want anyone else to have to do that either. And so I get letters from women who are in the same situation asking me for advice. And, if the question is, how do you get this to stop, or how do you, change their mind? I don't know the answer to that. The only thing I can say is that I want women to think about, what do you want to live with? What do you want for yourself? What, feels honest, what feels right. And that's what I want for women. That's what I wanted for myself. And that's what I want for every woman. So thank you very much for letting me speak.